This is a special edition of People vs. Algorithms. I am losing my voice. I don't know why. I think it's because I made a joke on a plane about why people were still wearing masks on planes. And sure enough, I'm losing my voice now after taking a flight. So there you go. Troy and Alex are unable to be here. Troy's traveling. Alex had some conflict. I wouldn't move the time. But AB, you're always reliable. I think that's
as long as it's in my calendar, then I can be reliable.
I love it. I love it. You know, I think that's a good trait in a banker. Reliability. I don't want fickle bankers.
This is going to be like the rebooting podcast.
We were going to do an episode about like the future of the knowledge economy, but I thought like because of the two of us, we should really dig more into what's going on in the M&A market. We did a little bit of this on the rebooting show, but there's so much more to get into. And I heard from a lot of people on it. People really liked it. You're like a star, AB. I don't know if you know this.
They liked it, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're a star.
It. Yeah,
you're
they loved it. Again, I'm just literally saying like basic information, but not everyone has access to it. So
let's get into the basic information that people don't have access to. But let's start with New York Tech Week. It is, I still don't think New York Tech Week exists, but it does apparently for some unknown reason. And so that means there's like parties and different things. I went to one like last night with Axel Springer. I don't know, any takeaways from like New York Tech Week?
So I think the idea is really good, but we're with this decentralized, because it's not easy to host a conference in New York, right? So it's completely
Everything
decentralized.
Everything is more difficult in New York City.
Where people have now gotten is they RSVP for everything. And then so you get added on to these event pages and you see it's like 500 people go. I've been to, this was last year, I went to an event where 500 people RSVP'd and then like 40 people actually showed up.
That's the worst.
Yeah, so obviously the dinners and I think other like curated events are great because everyone seems to be here from like the West Coast and other places. But I think the general large format events, I think they're going to have to figure out something to do with it because it's like not working. It's, you know, pushing everybody. They have like this, it's kind of funny when you go to the calendar, you know, they have all these random events because anyone could post on it. And then what it's supposed to be doing, I think it's kind of losing the juice because there's a bunch of random events. Like I said, there's 500 people RSVPing to stuff where 40 people come. I've been in reasonable kind of push to make it better, but it does feel like just in general, the market for B2B conferences and stuff like that, it's like full tilt, right? I feel like every time you go on LinkedIn, there's another event that...
There has to be a limit, correct?
Yeah.
Like at some point, like we're going to find the limit. And it's funny because, not funny, but you know, Business Insider had its cuts and they cut over 20% of the staff. It's even worse in the UK. It's really strange in the UK that like they like decimated their entire sales team in the UK. But it's really strange, you know, in the UK, you can't just like lay people off. Like you have to go into some like consultation process where they're just still working, like, but like you're getting rid of them, which is very strange. I don't know the best way to do these things. I'm not sure if that is though. But PI said that they're going to, you know, get into events now. And this is a really crowded area. Like, I don't know about, you know, that. I mean, look, I'm actually going to be talking with like the head of PI Live in Cannes at another massive event in a couple of weeks. But like, you know, I'm going into that conversation with, you know, I do have skepticism about just the sheer number of these events and I came from Digiday, which was a heavily reliant on events. So I know how they can work, particularly, you know, monetarily, and particularly now, you know, publishers want to get away from their exposure to the page view economy. I mean, I did a podcast, I think it was last week, with Jess Sibley from Time, and I was struck by one of the sort of metrics that are being like rolled out was how little revenue is tied to like basically ads on pages.
I mean, it's the one, well, there's a couple parts of these media companies that are not tied directly to CPM, but it's the one where the ratio of ad dollars to audience is like the most different compared to the traditional way that they make money. And so, some of like an Axios can charge a significant amount of money for getting 10 or 25 people in the room.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had 10 or 25 people to one of their pages that are not subscribed to one of their newsletter products, that's like less than a penny of value.
Yeah.
And so, but I do think it feels like these event bursts go in cycles, because basically when they come out and they launch in the first year or two, everyone has like a FOMO of like, I need to be here because my clients are going to be here, or the people that I need to talk to. But I think pretty quickly, and you've seen this with a couple events where the second or third years attendance has been much lower because people realize like I didn't need to go. But I feel like this year is still, especially as this economy continues to kind of hum along right now, is that everyone is going to everything. I've been to Las Vegas 4 times this year.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not a Las Vegas fan.
So it's like that's and it's all conference related,
Yeah, a lot of it is what the ROI is in that. It's like Cannes is, you're going to be in Cannes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Cannes is, I guess, like in 2 weeks, 10 days or so. And, it's funny from the publisher side, Cannes itself started as an advertising creativity. It was an award show, basically, a bunch of French ad agencies back in the day. But it's completely more from that. And it is now, like I call it, a carnival of capitalism. And it's not about the red carpet and the awards. It's about deal making. They say like they get like, 13,000 delegates, but they probably get 2 or 3 times that many people who are going and having meetings in the Carlton and on yachts and on beaches and cafes and the rest of that. And so I'm interested to see with Cannes. It's funny because you say like, well, the economy is like humming along. And I'm like, I talk with publishers, AB, and it is not humming along for them, which is like scary when you think about like what could happen. And they're like, a lot of them are trimming their plans there. Some of it was just because they didn't see the ROI on this. And so they just pulled back. One publisher, I had asked him if he was going, publishing executive, and I wanted to see if he would come to a dinner. And he was like, no, like we spent $400K there last year, didn't get one deal. And then others like swear by it. I had a podcast with Josh Stinchcomb this week from the Wall Street Journal. And, the Journal House is, it's a profit center. I like marketing expenses that become profit centers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably as a media company, it's like, who are your what clients are you catering to? I know when people have done like editorializing, like the evolution of Cannes, they always look at the boat lineup, right? So you look at who's has the biggest booth, who has the big, or not booth, but like the setup, and you could sort of see the evolution of players. I think, with the
Will I see you on the SS Experian at some point?
Sure. Yeah. But you sort of see this evolution. I'm sure OpenAI is going to have like a massive presence there in one way or another. Or Perplexity, right? Because basically
it's chump change.
Yeah, it's chump change. There's no real ROI needed. Like part of the reason they're probably showing up is just to make sure they don't get
bread and circuses is what I call it. It's just like, Google sort of was the first to really Microsoft really was the first to catch on to that, but it was really Google because Google was coming to eat the entire industry. And they thought all of it was ridiculous because they're an engineering company. And I remember Tim Armstrong, when he was the head of sales, I remember someone like saying about him, it's like, oh yeah, they just send Tim to collect the checks. And that was like, for a massive business, like it was never, Tim Armstrong could be like the CEO someday because he's in charge of like, 90. It's like, no, like that's not how these businesses work. And so they treated like Cannes, they thought it was like ridiculous, right? But then they realized, kind of like what they realized with politics was like, oh, you just spend a little bit of money And like, you can have like a lot of impact. And so like, yeah, we'll just splash out on some like massive beach and stuff and keep them, keep the advertising people happy enough.
I think one thing that's, you saw this at CES because the market's doing a little bit better and people are willing to do more M&A. I think one of the things that always, there's executive to executive check-in, there's executive to investor sort of check-ins, but it's these sort of conferences that even a 15 or 30 minute catch-up can spur larger transactions because it's a chance for people to talk about, hey, here's how my company's doing. And so I think they're obviously, these sorts of conversation are not as prolific as ad deals and other sorts of partnerships, but these places, especially when they attract like the entire executive class, it's the one way to push deals along, especially when you're trying to do a more strategic transaction. And what you're seeing right now in the market is a lot less processed, like businesses that are being shopped to 20 plus buyers, and more so of finding the 3 to 5 relevant people that would potentially be interested in acquiring the asset. So it's obviously you can't tie an ROI metric to it, but it's a utility that executives can get from being in these places. Because the funny thing though is you can't. I was talking about setting up the meeting in this context yesterday, and they're like, "Oh, let's do it at the company booth," and I'm like, "We are not going to have your potential acquirer walk in and have a meeting at one of the."
Do you have like a secret location that you go?
I mean,
you don't need to say
I've done hotel. I don't.
You do like the Ramada.
I think that
come to my hotel room.
We've gotten hotel rooms specifically for 20-minute meetings. Like we've gotten like very expensive rooms just for touch base because you're trying to provide some privacy and level of discretion. But I think people would be surprised about how quick things can move from those sorts of touch points.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be a couple of big themes that come out of it. Like one is the creators are going to be everywhere. We're going to see, it's funny because I talk about it as the information space because everyone competes with everyone. And, you talked about it like on the level of like getting like 10 or 20 people in a room, like Axios, can do that. Like, guess what? Like individuals can do that too.
Yeah.
It's certainly sort of what I see. And, I think the creators themselves, that's where the heat is right now. And they're going after the big budgets.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing with the creator, this happens in media through the cycles, is there is always this like grace period where what's hot doesn't necessarily need to tie to pure value yet. And I feel like that's where we are right now in the creator space where, brands are turning on Substacks. Like
not in the B2B creator space, AB.
But there's a lot of opportunity for these creators. I talked to someone who's hosting a creator event, and her point was like, everyone's going to be here, right? From the creator side. So I think, and probably last year there's a handful, but it's interesting to see how quick they're moving to the ad dollars. And to your point, like they can actually take down very large buys now. Like their ability to influence, or their perceived ability to influence, is high enough now where they can get direct deals from very large advertisers, which hasn't always been, right? Like a typical creator could expect $15,000 or $50,000, but I think it's getting more and more as these brands figure out different ways of doing the partnerships and have to lean in. There's like more competition, so their prices go up.
Yeah. I mean, how many of these creators are building like tradable assets?
Very few. Like look at the Mr. Beast business, right? So like the value that he's created, like yes, the YouTube channel has a ton of engagement, but in the deck that they were shopping the business with, like his chocolate company, Feastables, was like a core pillar of value, and how they focused like future value creation is additional businesses, not necessarily in his core vertical around video. But I think it's really tough. Like it takes someone who is basically multifaceted to basically wear the hat of a creator, but then also pull back and have the energy and the desire to build other things.
Yeah. And you got to get beyond like just the brand partnership deals and certainly the YouTube payouts, because you got to figure out how to build that other business. I always
Yeah.
say like media is like front business. You got to have a front. I mean, that's what Politico was. Politico is the front business for a Bloomberg-esque, business in the back at the end of the day. And figuring that out is the key because the page-view economy ain't coming back. And when you are exposed to CPM ad deals, I don't care if you're on YouTube or whatever, that's limited. And I don't know. That's what I think the most valuable of businesses that are going to be created.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you saw the Hailey Bieber transaction around her cosmetics brand. I think it's a little bit different than the Mr. Beast context because she had kind of partners. I'm sure she was somewhat involved, but it was purely on the back of her audience. And the product positioning was smart. There's like a lot of things that went into it. It's hard to like you see the LinkedIn takes on it, and it's hard to abstract like how that was made with like 3 bullet points because I think a lot went into it in terms of market positioning, pricing, But it's $1 billion, transaction. So
who's building these kind of businesses? Like, name check a couple of people that you think like people should keep their eye on because, maybe they're not Hailey Bieber, but like that they can build real serious enterprise. They're building real enterprise value, not a quote unquote lifestyle business.
let me take it in a little bit different direction, which is there's this company called Infinite Garden.
Oh yeah,
and so
you shared this. This was cool.
Yeah, and so this is a business it's from the co-founders of Care Of, which is like a really good D2C brand. They grew it and they sold it, and so their new company is able to they pair themselves up with creators or influencers and can spin up a brand in like weeks versus months or years. And so, because it's really hard to tell, especially if someone hasn't released a product before, how well it's going to be received by their audiences. Like there is, some signaling data that you can get. But I think a business like this is really interesting in that the speed to market is really quick, and then you can sort of test and learn from there. And I think they're going to create a really valuable platform where they're partnering with hundreds of creators and providing. So what they create is like supplements and other things that can be, delivered, nutrition and other things like that can be delivered through the mail. But they do all and everything is like AI powered, right? So they can do the branding, they can do all these things with the help of AI in a much faster timeline. And then they know all the producers and things like that. So I would say from where I sit, that's a bankable company. I think that there's always going to be consumer products created by these creators, but it's going to be very lumpy, right? In terms of where true value is created, where most of them, will end up like kind of Shark Tank companies where they're generating a couple million of EBITDA. It's a business, but it's not really something that's going to trade and be covered in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. I think one of the other big themes is going to be AI creative. I mean, you sort of flicked at it a little bit. We're seeing what is going on with the ad holding companies. I mean, they're going in a completely different direction because it's clear that Google and Meta are not just coming to eat like some of their lunch, but like the whole lunch and maybe their dinner and maybe their house and maybe their spouse. Because like they're basically, I mean, they identified, and it's funny because I mentioned Tim Armstrong. I always go back to a meeting I had with him at the Astor Place Starbucks, which was the greatest Starbucks in New York City, by the way. It's sad that it closed. And he sketched out for me this little system where he was like, a company's just gonna upload all of their SKUs and there's not gonna be any of this advertising. We're just gonna take it and we're gonna use all the data and whatnot. This was like 15, 20 years ago. And we're gonna just distribute it all over the place and they're just going to pay based on sales. And so we're not going to, and that was always the Google thing. It's like, we're not advertising, we're a cost of sales, uncapped budgets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's pretty clear that, ad holding companies are not going to be able to compete with their old models, and they are drastically changing their models. And it's going to be a weird thing to me that like this festival of creativity is going to all be about how robots can do the creative.
Yeah. I mean, the agency world and the way that companies use them, I feel like is always in this cycle where companies will take some of this stuff in-house and then pass it back to them. And when you learn more about like some tech products that people want to try to pitch to companies to improve their advertising, and they realize, oh, I have to go talk to the agency to get traction here. The agencies provide a level of service that's good enough, like good, but then they also provide cover for the CMO, the people that are hiring them, like for the performance, right? So yes, the buck stops with the CFO or CRO, but they can also pass some blame onto their agency partners when things go wrong, and they like to take credit when things go right. And so there's still a significant role for the agencies to play. I think what they're going to try to do.
That's not much of a moat, AB. CYA is.
It's just how the market works.
It's a niche business.
They provide a lot. They provide a lot more value than that. But I think that when it's ever come to like technical innovation or new ways of doing things, they've been like, it's really tough to go direct to a company. You always get forced talking to their agency. And so, not saying that's the only reason why people use agencies, but they serve a need. And I think that, yes, Facebook should be able to develop better AI tools than an agency can. But I think they can build up enough and still provide this level of client service that you can't necessarily get from Facebook. I mean, I think if you talk to most people in terms of their engagement with their Facebook or their Google rep, they're usually pretty frustrated. They say it's disorganized. Yeah. They say they don't care about me.
And also, by the way, their ad systems go down constantly.
Yeah, and like
which is insanity. Like to me, it's like they're this always on, and they're talking about AI. I'm like, you can't keep your ad systems up and running. Like, I mean, obviously it's massive scale, but it's also like massive money. So I just kind of expect if you're the most sophisticated companies in the world, you should be able to keep your ad system that is like most of your revenue up and running. I like stopped running the stories at Digiday about the frustrations over how their systems kept going down during peak periods, important periods, because it was just like gambling in Casablanca at some point. I was like, okay, well, look, if people just accept this as like, okay, like it's kind of like scaffolding in New York City. Like, I mean, I think it's like insanity that people live like this, but if that's the way that the majority of people want, the city to be, so be it.
Yeah. So but that start, like, as you talk about these themes, it starts to show you where agencies may go. They've obviously been pretty active on the creator space just to pick up that audience. But because if there's an ability to make more ads, then you need to manage more of that creative. And like, if you can create 1,000 more creative, copy that you're basically programmatically delivering to the audience, that's going to convert the highest. Someone's managing that, someone's leading that creative. So you may have less like hands on the keyboard to make the creative, but you're going to have someone still directing it. There's other providers that are providing like the brand safety and the measurement for that stuff. Like, that's still critical. I think the other thing, these AI engines only work well when the right customer data is fed into them. And a lot of companies don't have that properly set up, even if they pretend they do. And you can see it's the simplest thing for agencies to like lean into is cleaning up that, the CDP, the customer data profiles and things like that, to help basically better facilitate Facebook's targeting or Google's targeting. So you have like the full funnel of information.
Yeah. And there's a lot of handcrafted stuff in the agency business still. Like, there's a lot of people who are doing stuff that, I mean, I don't even know if AI is needed. I mean, maybe just like, Zapier at some point could be used. Like, there's a lot of that. And so, I mean, we're seeing, Group M just rebranded, I guess, as WPP Media, and they're like cutting swaths of people. And look, they'll redeploy because, but it'll be a different type of people. And I think one of the things is a little bit outside of the banking realm, but one of the things that I think is not quite appreciated, Trey has like mentioned this before, is a lot of people went into advertising who are creative individuals. It might not be their quote unquote passion, but it was, they were DJs or there were painters and this was a way to a little bit have your cake and eat it too. Like, you didn't have to be a starving artist. You could be an ad creative, but also still do your art. And look, I know there's so many second and third order impacts when we talk about AI, but I also like sort of concerned about that, right? Like, I mean, the reality was like, this was a profession that supported a lot of people who were doing other like creative things that I hope like enriched our society and culture to a large degree. But also it's like, I don't know, it's like a society, it's good to have people that are able to pursue creative endeavors. And that is an avenue that is going to be less available to a lot of people. I'm not saying there's still going to be people who are incredibly creative, but you're not going to need the same numbers.
Yeah. I mean, there's still be a lot of people, but I feel like it'll be weighted more that the hyper creative people will be able to produce a lot more. And so you can see you could see like this profile in the New York Times in like 5 years where it's like this one 25-year-old person created like the top 10 advertising for the Super Bowl. Like he basically, or he or she made.
Within 5 years, an individual will win the top award in Cannes, or an individual working with like a ton of AI bots. Like it's inevitable that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's someone like, I know this guy like Jason Zada. He was an ad creative, right? But he's really a filmmaker. And I mean, I knew him like when he was the ECD at this San Francisco agency called EVB. They did the Elf Yourself. Do you remember Elf Yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that one interesting element.
But he does all of this. He's making these like AI films basically now.
Yeah.
They go viral all the time.
I mean, disruption can be enabled at a much more rapid pace when the market favors a change. And so in terms of like general content production, it's not a healthy ecosystem, right? The costs have gone up so much after COVID. It's like the government spending. It's like costs are up way too much. The audience is going down. The amount of people wanting to buy content has gone down. And so that is like opportune for this AI component, even with like the different unions who are trying to hold it back. But it's like the perfect environment for lower cost of content creation to exist.
Yeah, on that, like I think it's pretty interesting how the Hollywood unions were like kind of ahead of it. Like, they dug in their heels on the use of AI. But I wonder if that's going to be like a giant long-term L, which I think, honestly, I mean, I understand like unionization. I took a little shot at unions like last week with regard to, BI and all of these people, all these companies that I've witnessed go into terminal decline. Like just about all of them went through these union battles. And like, I think about it, I'm like, well, the White Walkers were coming and you're battling over like whose slice of the pizza was bigger, and like there ain't no pizza left. I mean, congrats, Vice unionized. It doesn't exist. I mean, it exists, but went bankrupt. And I think in some ways it's gonna, they're gonna have to compete, and it's gonna be a totally different cost basis. That's gonna be a tough one, I think, in a lot of these businesses.
The market is demanding a reset in the cost, right? You cannot today easily you cannot have like a independent content production company. Like it's way harder than it was 5 years ago. The other nuance is like, there are ways to go around the union, right? So like the union doesn't stop the distribution of content. They get mad about that, but their only control is over the labor supply that's also unionized. And so there's a lot of content that gets put out on TV that's non-union. And so they don't have like a complete stronghold, obviously on the stars, they do, and a good amount of the talent, but there are ways to start to crack away at how the ratio of content that's produced in a real environment versus in this AI world that's like a non-union, non-expensive content.
Yeah. Look, that's one of the reasons a lot of events are in Miami. Like, I mean, we did this like at my last job. Yeah. I mean, you start to do events in New York City and you realize that you just paid more for someone to like bring in a TV than the TV cost. And all of a sudden you're really into Miami as an option, because that's, this is the laboratory. This is a laboratory, not just of democracy, but of capitalism, and see which you got to compete. Let me ask you this, because I had a meeting with a newsletter person earlier today. And this is sometimes, I think, kind of lost about how the economics of some of these businesses can be really good. Because we talk a lot about, at least I do, about the doom and gloom, because that's only one part of like the media ecosystem. It's massive. And this person, I said I would make them anonymous, but really they should be like bragging about this. Do like almost $3 million this year, and like 90% margins. like
Yeah.
one person, no FTEs, like newsletter, podcast, and some like small activations.
Mhm.
Great businesses.
Yeah. I mean, the one you're talking about, the question is like, can you turn, even if that person wants to turn it into more of a B2B media company, or if they're just happy with a couple $1 million.
Well, that's what we were talking about is, and that's what I wanted to get your take on, because I want to connect you with. It's funny, I gave them advice over the last couple of years. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I like your business more than my business. What am I doing here? But in a very lucrative niche, I'll just say, and not that publishing is not a lucrative niche. I mean, it's not. But like, I think the question is, do you want to keep like going at those kind of like margins, or do you want to build like a quote unquote like real business? I think AI scrambles a lot of this. I don't know if other people have this, but I feel like a lot of layoffs that are happening now, or a lot of people are just like delaying hiring because you just don't know what will be able to be done by robots versus adding more fixed costs in a completely like unknown environment. Like every day, like I see it's like every day it's like Dario says that like, 90% of doctors will be gone in 3 years. I'm like, oh, okay. Like these days you just like sort of shrug. You're like, okay.
Yeah. The layoffs that are happening now are more because of this disruption of traffic, less about AI's impending doom. And the problem too is like, so like, it's interesting. This whole cost thing is something relevant to talk about at media companies. So say you have an employee base and you have an office here in New York, you have all these things, right? Your costs are going to go up at least 3 to 5% or more per year. And they've gone up a lot higher post-COVID. The problem is the media company's revenue has not matched that. And so even if you just keep your revenue the same, you have to trim headcount and other costs to maintain the same EBITDA. And that, I think this cost issue is apparent in everything. The government budget, like the amount we're spending on like Medicare or Medicaid is like double what it was in 2019. And so it's happening at companies. And so some of these layoffs are not necessarily their revenue is down that much. In some cases it is, but it's just the fact that things have gotten a lot more expensive and they're not making that much more money. And so they're basically having to say, okay, how can we do the same with less people? That's the nice thing about events too. Does it really require that much? Sometimes these media companies outsource part of the production and planning, so they don't really take any risk. They bring in advertisers up front, they sell tickets.
Well, they take risk. I mean, you got to put down deposits and whatnot.
A little, yeah, but it can be pretty mitigated. But back to your newsletter person. The interesting thing with like media companies when they sell for large amounts of money is like, it's kind of like a venture-backed business where you're delaying profit in the hopes that your audience and revenue grow big enough to where someone else comes along and buys you. There's been very few businesses, like Axios is pretty unique, where you've created like sustainable businesses that were fully independent.
But look at Politico. Politico didn't make any money.
Yeah, but most of the time you're basically banking on the fact that you're going to grow and then find someone to buy you. And so I think for these Substacks and newsletters that are generating a couple million in revenue, everyone wants to kind of apply. When they, like a lot of people that write these, everyone asks them like, when are you going to hire more writers? When are you going to go through the normal cycle of what a media company does? And like adding more content, building the audience, increasing monetization. But it's like for them, I think they know that if they start doing that, they're not going to make the same level of profit. And there's an insane amount of risk associated with it because the pool of potential buyers is much less than it ever has been. And so I think for a person that you mentioned, the $3 million person, the ways to figure out how to create additional enterprise value is in like different vectors where you can tap into the audience, provide them some level of service or value that they pay for that's different than reading the content.
Yeah. Is revenue per employee an increasingly important metric? Has it always been important? Or like, because to me, like a lot of times I've noticed like a change in, people used to always say like how many employees they had as like a a sort of flex. And
Yeah.
it was like, okay, well, you can sort of figure out how they're growing. You're like, well, we have like 75 employees. And you're like, okay, it's a media company. I'm going to like, do some basic multiplication. But now I feel like it's kind of the opposite. Like a lot of times, if you don't have like any full-time employees who are like, oh, nice. I find it a lot because as someone who doesn't, like people are like, good job. Like, I don't know if that is a good job. But is that like, do the metrics end up changing? The KPIs?
I mean, I think there's like, it depends where you're at, right? So if you're selling a company, you tend to use like benchmarking data, like revenue per employee. If your company, you basically pick the metrics that make your company that you're selling look good, right? And so, yeah, we've used that before. And it's meant to show that like you have an organization that is really efficient and you figured out something. Because if you think about it, like in a competitive kind of capitalist society, like your margins should come down because more competition should come in until like the profit is at a normalized level. And so I think one of the things by just showing the revenue per employee is you can just show how efficient you are. And it should correlate to profitability unless there's like some fixed cost or not fixed, like some other cost that is a significant part of the P&L that's not attached to employees. So real estate, IT, like there's other costs. Typically for a lot of these businesses, employees is the number one.
I feel like in the last era, you'd have these, particularly the venture funded companies where they have like $200,000 like per employee. And then you look at like, a punch bowl model and it's over $1 million. And that's more along the lines of what you see in other businesses. I don't want to say like in all tech businesses, but I mean, look, these businesses are not tech businesses. But if you're small, to me, it's like, you better make a lot per employee if you're small.
It's interesting. Like if you think about it from the difference, because it's the best way to do benchmarking is to compare like for like companies, right? And so a punch bowl might have a different revenue mix than a larger media company. To me, like an interesting example is like in academia, the ratio of like administrators to professors has like gotten completely out of whack. And so I think the metric can probably tell you when an organization is completely bloated. And so one way you like, just talking about it from an M&A context, if you had a benchmarking page and you were acquiring a company whose revenue per employee was low, you could say, I wonder if we can gain efficiencies by laying off some people, right? Because you can say, this is a bit out of whack. Like this organization is run inefficiently. Can we improve it?
So one other topic I wanted to talk to you about, which was, I saw Newsweek is buying Ad Prime, which is a healthcare DSP. I think Newsweek is a really interesting business. It's gone through so many different like things that like, there was like lawsuits, there's all these accusations. They were, content farm for a little while. And then they've like quietly been doing like really well under Dev Pragad. I'm trying to get Dev on the Rebooting show. We keep like trying to schedule it, but totally different type of business now than it was when it was like a news weekly. But they're like zeroing in on these B2B niches like health. I'm a little wary. We're going to have a little debate there because like without knowing any of the details, when I see a publisher has bought an ad tech company, I don't investigate anymore. And I say, it's a terrible idea. It's like when in a horror movie, when like the babysitter opens up the door to the basement and decides to explore, I already know it's a terrible idea. So tell me why it's wrong. I'm wrong. Why should Newsweek go into the basement?
Yeah. With the Scream mask on. So let's just start with how Newsweek got successful. And it's a kind of a fun story. Like if you Google it, they had like the Korean Christian cult guy. It's like a whole random backstory.
It's a movie.
Yeah. There's one place where Google has favored publishers and there's a couple publishers that have benefited from the favorability with Google. And so what I mean by that is when websites have a long publishing history, significant backlinks, and are perceived by Google as reputable, even if like maybe it's dimmed over a couple of years and they produce less content, there is a lot of value in, probably having one of the first news sites on the internet, things like that, where when you start to lean into the right content, it's going to rank and show up much higher than anybody else. And so I think what they've done really well is just retooling the content and done it in a way to where they've created a profitable business. And like Newsweek is, there's a couple of these like news brands that don't mean anything, but kind of mean everything, right? So like US News.
Yeah.
What is that? It produces news. It produces college rankings, but they've created a really
It's a complete listings business, isn't it?
Yeah, but they produce news. Like there's news on the website.
Yeah, but that's like I don't know. I mean, like that's not what the business is.
But same thing with Newsweek. It's like, sure, it had
It's got a programmatic ad business, that's fine.
Yeah, it is a brand. I think we're Newsweek, and the reason why I think this acquisition is interesting is, one, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, like in terms of total value. And I would say that if you weighted the value of what they paid for, it's less about the tech and more about the direct relationships with the healthcare companies.
Yeah.
So meaning, because Newsweek has a pretty large audience in this space and they can keep growing it. But what advertisers look for whenever they go to any publisher is they want to make sure the audience is of enough scale that they don't need to do 20 different direct buys. They can do a couple. And so a lot of publishers that are growing always struggle to win larger RFPs because their audience isn't big enough.
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing that this solves is that they can compete, and it's a programmatic solution too, but it gives them access to their side audience and they have all that data on those people, but then everywhere else on the internet to deploy advertising. And this is both, if you look up that company, it's really hard to figure out what they do. I think I figured out.
What, like Ad Prime or Newsweek?
Ad Prime.
Yeah.
Meaning the website is like cryptic. And so from what I gleaned from the CEO's LinkedIn bio is it does both consumer and professional advertising.
Okay.
And so the professional space, that's like, there's so much money spent. I mean, every time, like whenever you're in a doctor's office, you see those drug reps showing up to try to sell in, whatever, the new, new drug that's like 10% better that they're trying to get market share.
They're bringing in the sandwiches.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of money spent there. And then separately, on the consumer side, the proliferation of a lot of new companies around blood testing, direct-to-consumer, hair loss, ED, all these things, like the money that's moving in.
Yeah. No, it's a massive market. It's like, pharmaceuticals alone is what, like 15, 16% of the economy. I think it's a curious market for Newsweek. I don't know. Like, I think the question for a lot of these type of brands, look, you can find pockets of any kind of group in your audience if it's big enough, right? But they end up, maybe it's me as like a content guy. Like, I'm like, do you have permission in there? Like, I mean, why like Newsweek and health? I mean, I want to ask Dev, like, why in the world would Newsweek be synonymous with like health? I don't get that.
It's a point. These brands mean everything and nothing. So like he can now with that new revenue lean into building out, and maybe he already has a bunch of newsletters or something, but he can lean into creating health content. And my point about his positioning with Google is like, he will get traffic. Like he's probably not going to rank better than the Mayo Clinic, but he has an opportunity to leverage the advertiser dollars to then fund new content creation. The one wild card where this acquisition makes like 10x is if RFK turns off pharma advertising, right? So if that stops, like on TV, that will have all that money. Who knows? Because right now it's really interesting when you look at the breakdown.
It's too big. It's too big. It's like when Trump was like, I'm going to raise the taxes on the richest people. Like Trump doesn't back down on anything. I haven't heard anything on that since you mentioned it.
They're never going to take away the carried interest loophole. But this advertising industry is the most weighted towards traditional media. It's still 50-50, right? So in most cases, it's weighted way more towards digital now in terms of where the ad dollars are spent, depending on consumer vertical. Healthcare is still 50-50. So even if there's a little bit of friction around advertising on Fox News at 6:00, I think it benefits this company. Well, so
Rupert is going to like turn up the heat if that happens.
So the value, I think, in this acquisition is less about the tech, because it's probably easy to replicate. It's more about the advertiser relationships and basically being able to supply the advertisers with what they want. which is more audiences. The cool thing too is Newsweek should be able to sell in additional premium content and other packaging. Healthcare companies are notoriously bad at creating their own content. Like they'll pay a brand like McKinsey or Bain to build websites around new drugs just to educate consumers that they need them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for Newsweek to make money on this.
Let's do a very quick, good product. This is a little cliche, but New York City in like early June, fantastic product. You know, it's not during February. I think it's a terrible product. January too, and large swaths of the year, it's not a great product. But having been here this week,
it's hot. It's hot.
It's not that. It's like 75 degrees. It's like amazing. I don't know how young people afford to live here, but if they can get their parents to pay for it, I don't understand why any young person wouldn't live here. I was walking back from the Axel Springer house there in Nolita and walking back downtown through like the East Village and Lower East Side. And they're closing off like Orchard Street and stuff now. It's like amazing. There's like run clubs around, roller blading clubs. It's great.
Yeah, it's a great city. It's definitely back after COVID. So
yeah, that meme is gone, I think.
There are still some characters running around.
Well, that's what keeps it real. I mean, this is like the last place where, you know, the rich, the not rich, but like resentful that they're not rich, and like the extremely poor all rub up against each other, like, you know, to different types of effects. But it's unique.
Yeah, the grittiness is good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, AB. We'll be back with a regular episode next week.
That's it for this episode of People versus Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.